Welcome to the Here We Go podcast. I am your host, Trent Gang. It is officially Monday morning as of when I'm doing this recording. We have a game Monday night football, Steelers, Giants at Acrisure Stadium. Today's podcast is going to talk in large part about the quote, Omar Khan missing out on wide receiver trades. The first thing I'm going to talk about real quick before I get into that is just the opportunity in front of us as a fan base, the Steelers as an organization, and what it could potentially mean for the season. Now, it's no secret the Giants aren't a very good football team right now. Offensively, they've been a complete disaster. So this is a great opportunity, as Colin and I talked about Friday, of going into the bye at 6-2. Now, as I've thought about this morning, the interesting thing to me is what's going on in the AFC North. The Browns are a really bad football team. And yes, they beat the Ravens last night. Well, yesterday afternoon. But they're still a 2-5 football team. 2-6, whatever they are. They're not very good. So when I was looking at and thinking about the back half of the schedule, we talked about this being kind of a gauntlet after the bye week, and especially with the Commanders playing better. But the Commanders did not play the Bears very well. They get a Hail Mary at the end of the game because one of the DBs is trying to taunt fans instead of being lined up in his position. And, of course, he's the guy, I think, get a hand on the ball that tips it back to the Commanders receiver who ends up catching it to win the game. So that's not a sense of irony. I don't know what is. But they didn't look like a particularly good football team in that game. So that one's going to be a really interesting game. But you have to feel like it's winnable. When I'm looking at the Cincinnati Bengals, who got they got blown out by the Eagles. Let's call it what it is. And I don't think the Bengals are a very good football team. They're 3-5. Their 3 wins are against 3 of the worst teams in the entire NFL. I think it was the Raiders, the Patriots, and I believe Carolina. They're a bad football team. I'm sorry, but their defense is not very good. And they've given up 37 points or more 3 times this season already. So when I'm thinking about the fact that we have 4 games between the Bengals and the Browns, if you win on Monday Night Football and go to 6-2, and then you say take 3 of those 4 games, that's 9 wins right there. You're knocking on the door of the playoffs. If by chance you sweep both of those teams, that's 10 wins and you're pretty much guaranteed to be in the playoffs. Then all you have to do is sneak a win out somewhere else in the schedule, and we could be talking about competing for the division. I know it's early in the season, but if we win tonight, we're in sole first place in this division. And I think if you were to ask most people if the Steelers would be in that position 8 weeks into the season, I'm not sure you'd have somebody who would have said, yes, they will be in first place. I don't think a lot of people took Colin and I very seriously when we thought the Steelers were going to finish second in the division. Everybody was so high on the Bengals. Oh, they've got this great offense, and Jamar Chase and Joe Burrow and T. Higgins, and they're going to carry this team they're going to be an 11-win football team. Guys, you still have to play defense in the NFL. This isn't college. You can't score 40 points every week. The Bengals have to because their defense is bad. The only games they've actually played well are against those three teams I talked about that are the worst teams in the NFL, and they are some of the worst offensive teams in the NFL at that. And this team's still giving up 25.5 points a game. And they're giving up something like 138 yards rushing a game. I think, and I'm calling this pretty early, if the Steelers win tonight, we have a really good chance to win the division. I'm shocked that we're in this position, to be perfectly honest with you. This is not something that I predicted. I can't take any credit for this whatsoever. But I will say, I honestly believe we play the Ravens so well every single year. And so far, they've not had Derrick Henry, which is a completely different element to this whole thing. But I'll tell you what, the Ravens' defense hasn't been the same defense that we've seen in years past. Their offensive line started the year out really bad, but I think they have gotten much, much better. But that defense just doesn't look like the same defense that we're used to seeing from the Ravens. Even with Derrick Henry, if our offense just continues to progress and get better, I think you feel good about splitting with them. I'm not sure I'm necessarily really afraid of them. Not in the terms of getting swept, at least. I think there's a realistic shot this team can compete for the division as long as everything goes well. We stop getting all these injuries to pile up. We can get a little bit of luck with health. I think there's a real shot. But I'm going to get into the talking points of this particular episode, and that is the idea that Omar Khan keeps, quote, missing out on wide receivers. I saw people posting, Omar Khan misses out on Cooper Kupp. I mean, was Cooper Kupp actually really available? I mean, teams were reaching out to gauge interest. That doesn't necessarily mean he's available, because guess what? Cooper Kupp's not getting traded. The Rams won. The 49ers are kind of a mess right now with their injury situation and the way they're playing. They don't look like the team they were last year. And so I think it's fair to say the Rams are right in the thick of things in that division. They're not trading Cooper Kupp. So guess what? Omar Khan didn't miss out on a guy. A guy has to be available for you to miss out on him. And the other thing that I find interesting, all these, fans on Twitter and things like that, oh, I'd give a first for this guy. I'd give a second for that guy. We need to give him whatever. I mean, unless it's like a ridiculous talent, like a Chris Olave's name came up, I'd consider a first-round pick for Chris Olave. I just think he's that good. He's young. He's still on his rookie deal. I would consider giving a first-round pick for Chris Olave. But I have had 0 times throughout the rest of this thing said I'd give a first-round pick for anybody else. Brandon Ayuk? No. I really like Brandon Ayuk as a player, but I wasn't willing to give a first-round pick for a guy like that and pay him the money you were going to pay him. Not Devontae Adams. I wasn't giving up that kind of draft capital for a guy like Devontae Adams. They were talking about a second-round pick for Cooper Kupp. Cooper Kupp is 31 years old. He's missed 4+ games in each of the last 3 seasons. Why in the world would we give up a second-round pick for that? I'm not doing that. There's no way. I'm not doing that deal. So, if we look back at the last 2 drafts, at first-round picks or second-round picks, you can talk about Broderick Jones not being a good pick, but he was a developmental player anyway. You're going to have to wait all 4 years of his rookie deal to determine whether he's a bust or whether he was a really good pick. Because I can tell you as of right now, you don't know. I know people are going to talk. He's been bad. He's been, bad's kind of an understatement. He's not been a good player at all, right? But he's a guy who has a ton of talent, a ton of upside, was a developmental piece to begin with, and you have to just wait it out. There was a lot of people talking about he wasn't going to be a good player for 3 seasons, and he's in his second year right now, and we're not even quite halfway through the season. Give him time. Then start having the conversation about being a bust. If he's still in the same position next year as he is this year, I'm on board with you. I'll have that conversation all day about him being a bust. But what was behind him? Joey Porter Jr., Keanu Benton, bona fide starters. Darnell Washington, you might as well consider him a starter on this team because we run so much 12 personnel. Nick Herbig. That was the list of Omar Khan's first draft. So why is this guy not willing to throw away draft picks to bring in a receiver short term? Because he's making something of these draft picks that are long-term solutions for this franchise. Look at last year's draft. Fautanu, I know we only saw him for a game, but he looks like a bona fide star at tackle. Zach Frazier, bona fide star at center. Let's stick with the offensive line. 4th round, Mason McCormick has played very well. For a small school guy, changing positions and coming in for a guy like James Daniels and to play the way he's played, oh my goodness, that's a ton of value. Peyton Wilson, you might as well call him a starter because he's playing way more than a Landon Roberts. Regardless of where they list him on the depth chart, he's a starter. The only name we haven't really seen is Roman Wilson. He's been hurt all season, and the one game he was here, he played 5 snaps. You're not going to get a good judgment of a player based on 5 snaps. So yes, Omar Khan is being conservative in the way that he does business. But wouldn't you want him to be with the draft classes that he's pumping out? Because I do. I don't want him throwing away picks. Unless you're guaranteed a great player and you cannot draft a better player in whatever round you're going to give up. I'm okay with him being conservative, if I'm being completely, totally honest. The other thing is, everybody wants this star-studded receiver. We don't even really need a star-studded receiver. Everybody wants this guy who can be the reliable target that Russell Wilson can throw to when he needs something to happen. Well, in my opinion, shouldn't that be Pat Freiermuth? Isn't that why we just paid him? We need another receiver who can take the top off the defense, because right now Van Jefferson doesn't scare anybody. And you don't have to pay significant draft capital to get a player like that. We need a guy who's a good run blocker at wide receiver. And you don't have to pay a ton of money for that. Mike Williams, he was the first person I said I thought was a really good fit. I still think he's a really good fit. Jacoby Myers' name's been thrown out there. I'm not honestly sure the Raiders would be or should be motivated to trade him. I know they're a bad team. I know on some level it makes sense just to start to acquire as many picks as you can if you're that franchise. I think they have their playmaker in Brock Bowers already. So from some standpoint, I could see the logic of them moving on from Myers. But he's not an overly expensive player. He's not hurting your cap. And you have a young quarterback. Well, Minshew played yesterday. Aiden O'Connell's been banged up. But if O'Connell's going to be the guy they're going to give a fair shake to see what he is, then I think that you want at least, you just traded Devontae Adams. You're going to trade your other receiver also? I mean, from that standpoint, I'm not sure it makes a ton of sense. So I'm not sure I would trade him if I were them. But if they did, I think he'd be a great fit for this organization because he does all the things well that this team would need. Outside of that, you're looking at a Darius Slayton who has all the measurables, but he does drop the ball at times. So from a fan base that absolutely just destroyed Deontay Johnson for 4 years, it seemed like 4 years in a row. Yes, I realize he was here longer than 4 years, but for 4 years in a row, because he had drop issues his second season. I mean, you guys tortured him for 4 years about drops. Well, Slayton drops the ball just as much as Deontay Johnson. So for all those guys, yelling and screaming for Slayton, if you really want him, you're going to have to accept the drops are coming with him. Christian Kirk out for the season. He's not going to come here. I don't know who else is really going to be available. I mean, we could see a late name pop up. Who knows? I've seen Adam Thielen. To me, Adam Thielen does not move the needle even a little bit. I am not convinced he's even much better than Van Jefferson. He's 34 years old. He's not going to take the top off. He's always been more of an underneath route runner. Now he's a good route runner. I will give him credit for that. And people were talking about, he had 100 catches and 1,000 yards. And he plays for a team that didn't have a second wide receiver or a tight end to throw the ball to. And the Chuba Hubbard's not even a good receiving back. He's okay, but he's not like Bijan Robinson or anything like that. He's their only target. Of course, he's going to get force-fed the ball. So don't take sheer statistics and say, well, look what he did. Because he's not going to do that in this offense. Number one, we don't work the middle of the field, which is one area he's done a lot of his damage. And to be honest with you, I'm not even sure that Adam Thielen would be any higher in the pecking order than Pat Freiermuth is. To me, Muth would still be your number 2 target. I mean, maybe I'm reading too much into this. I don't know. Thielen would be a very good blocker. He's a professional. He might bring a little something to the table that maybe George Pickens would respect, but I don't even know about that. Like, he doesn't move the needle for me at all. To me, the one guy that we know is available is Mike Williams. He would be the guy I would look at. I was told the Jets may not move him if all they can get is a 7th round pick, which is very surprising to me simply because that's 3 guys in their wide receiver room that bring no special teams value whatsoever. Adams, Garrett Wilson, and Mike Williams are not playing on special teams. So I find that fascinating that they're going to continue to have this many guys in their wide receiver room that don't contribute to special teams at all. I guess I don't know their special teams arrangement and who they have and what roles, but I know most teams like to use wide receivers in special teams games. So I don't know. Maybe they're using guys at the bottom of the depth chart. I don't know. Mike Williams is the guy to me that makes the most sense as of right now. And the names that I've seen, I might even honestly, I know he's got an injury history and things, but if it's not him or Darius Slayton, I don't know that you should even make a deal. Because Omar Khan has had too much success flipping these picks into quality players. And so I'm personally, we've got like 3 7th-round picks. It feels like we got 100 7th-round picks. You could maybe package some and throw to a team that's going to be needy of draft capital and move up into maybe the 5th round or something. I don't know. I'm not throwing away a pick just to throw away a pick, even though I do believe the bottom of the draft, because of NIL and things like that in the COVID year, it's not what it normally would be because you're not getting the quality of players of what you're used to getting. So I would just caution fans not to say, oh, yeah, I'd give this, I'd give that. Like, put some perspective on this. We do absolutely need wide receiver help, but we don't need it at the expense of selling off the franchise, unless you guys are just dead set convinced that with Russell Wilson leading this offense, we could be a Super Bowl team. The defense is capable, and there's no doubt about that. And we would presumably get, I should say, Troy Falatanu back in the postseason. Now, I don't know what you would do in that scenario. That'd be conversation for a much later date. But your offensive line could potentially get even better if you make the playoff. But you better be convinced this offense can take you there if you're going to make just an absolute crazy move. Or you get a guy that's just so dang good that you can't pass up. And I don't know who that is unless there is a guy like Chris Olave out there. So let me know what you think. Do you think I'm on the right track here? Do you think I'm way off base? Give me your feedback. As always, like, share, subscribe. Let's get a win on Monday Night Football so we can talk about that on Wednesday and go into the bye at 6-2 and number 1 in the division. Hope you all have a great night. Hope we have a fantastic game to watch